So as Nicole said, Bob Jeffcott, I've worked for Software AG for about 28 years. I think, Josh, you asked, my first programming language was indeed Natural and Adabas. So I was fortunate enough to have a company that kicked out their computer and they brought in Adabas and Natural. And they said, well, we need, because this was back in the day when you just didn't plop down a mainframe, they had to build it for you. So they said, hey, we need to send someone up to Software AG in Atlanta to do a pilot system. And they're like, who's young and unattached and can go do that? And so, yep, that was me. So today's thing, what zero trust security means for you. And I want to give you guys the definition, and I had to actually print it off. Zero trust for database is a security framework and strategy designed to enhance data protection by assuming that threats exist both outside and inside an organization's network. All right, thanks, you guys. No, but seriously, we're not only going to talk about what is zero trust, and we'll get to that in a second, but why you should care, why the people in this room should care, where you should care about it, because while we said database, there's a lot more to it. And then how? How can you actually help to implement zero trust? And I guess just touching on the why, and I think you had mentioned it about APIs. It used to be that we were our little self-contained unit about the only thing you ever got out was a report, Now you have APIs, you have FTPs, you have all this other stuff. You have open, everyone wants your data. Everyone wants access to your business logic. So this comes from the National Institute of Standards and Technology. Yes, US-based, but it is really being embraced as a worldwide standard. So anytime you see this, or when someone talks about zero trust and throws up an architecture, you're going to see this. And we're going to spend the next 45 minutes talking about each one of these components. Okay, yeah. Not really, but I do want to highlight a couple things. So the idea of, and I will tell you, this is the perfect world, zero trust. You have a policy engine. And that policy engine basically says, who are you? What are you trying to do? When are you trying to do it? And where are you trying to do it? Okay, we'll let you. There's the administrator that says, okay, I'm going to enforce that, throw in a couple more things in there, and then that policy enforcement endpoint is where every single access to every single resource in your enterprise goes through. You have a variety of inputs. These are all the different inputs that may go into that zero trust process. So CDM, and we love acronyms, right? So continuous diagnosis and monitoring systems. So something that says, is this normal? Is this right? You have the industry compliance standards. We'll talk a little bit about that. There's even threat intelligence. They're even starting to use AI now for that. Activity logs at all levels, data access policies. If you're using public key, there's public key infrastructures, ID management, and the SIM, which is system information. I don't even remember what one it is. So show of hands in this room, whose enterprise looks like that? No, don't be shy. Okay. Yeah, so I've worked not only, as Nicole said, state and local, but I've also worked in federal three-letter agencies where if I told you, they'd kill me, not kill you. No one has this, right? So when you hear zero trust, and we do say it is a framework, but it really is, as they say, a strategy, right? No, there is no perfect thing. You can probably pay some consulting company to say you are zero trust, certified. There is no real one for that. So kind of think of it as not necessarily a framework, but think of it as a goal, because they're more like guidelines, right? So the idea of that is that, and I just realized I can't scroll down on my notes. But he can. Thank you. If you go all the way to the bottom. Sorry, thanks. So there are the components for that. So, and we'll talk a little bit more in detail about that. And if you could go up just one little bit, sorry. Thanks. So things like multi-factor authentication, segmentation, continuous access monitoring, continuous access verification. A lot of these things are very, very important. But I'm going to steal something from your presentation. So it's typically things that have not really affected the mainframe world, have not really affected the Adabas Natural world. Anytime you start to talk about security, it's like, oh, it's those network guys. Or it's, you know, it's outside my concern because we're with inside the firewall. We're with inside the VPN. We're fine. But we're going to talk about a lot of places where you're not so fine. Oh, sorry, going back to your point, his Titanic slide, now that was for just development, right? Well, not just development, but for everything. But that same thing is very true when it comes to security. Look, no one even knows what Adabas is or how to get into it. Eventually, they will figure it out, right? So sometime, somewhere, they are coming for you. And we'll talk about a couple different possible ways that will happen. So a little bit more about what is zero trust. So we talk about, on that previous slide, it said resources. And typically we think of data, databases, data. Resources in the zero trust world is everything. It's not only data, it's the devices that the data is accessing from. It's the networks it's going across. It's the workload. It is the people, right? So these are all the things that you have to keep in mind. And when we talk about the guideline part, so a couple things. Verify identity. Authenticate and authorize users before granting access to resources. That means every single time, not just once, right? So, you know, and we're all kind of guilty of this, is certain users can get in and do everything, no matter where they are. You know, and once they're in, they're in. You never get checked again. So the idea is to verify all the time. And this is the most important part of that, is least privileged access. Give the minimum level of access necessary to do the task assigned. Linux world, you guys are pretty good at that, but you still have that, you know, SU to a super user. And suddenly you can do a lot of different things. So that is one of the things. Micro-segmentation, and I think we are probably one of the ones really guilty of this, is that once you're in, I can get into anywhere, into any of the databases, I can cross over. Who here has in their DDMs a DBID of 0? Just one. You guys really don't have, yeah, everyone does, right? Because it's one of those things you always do. But if you have a user that can get access, you give edit access to a DB or a DDM, they can actually put a DBID in there. And you can, from test, access production data. And no one will know if you're not tracking it right. And this is another piece, is inspect and log all traffic. Now it says all network traffic, but in our world, I think it's really important for all the natural security logs are turned on. All the Adabas logs are turned on, and we'll talk a little bit more about a couple different ways of doing that here in a bit. And then assume a breach. In other words, assume someone's in your system somewhere and go, well, how can I mitigate that? How can I limit that damage? So those are all things that are really, I think, what you want to concern yourself about. So even if you're not having a zero trust initiative in your enterprise, these are all types of security issues, because we're so used to, these systems have been around for so long, we're used to doing the same thing and essentially getting away with it because no one knows us. So that's a little bit about what it is. We'll talk more as we go through this. But now I want to talk a little bit about why it's important. So who here has actually had a zero trust initiative in their enterprise? Okay. It is coming. In some form or fashion, it's coming. You're already seeing it. Either the GDPR, in the US, we have a whole host of different initiatives and security initiatives. Now with the Cloud Strategies Alliance, you're seeing a lot more of the security there. You're starting to see where the cloud connects to the ground, and then they're saying, well, we want that ground to be as safe and secure as the cloud. That's part of our standards. So all of these things will have some sort of zero trust initiative in them. Another reason why. Let's look at a little bit about the where and whys of breaches. So 30% are from outside, 70% are from inside. Okay? And when we talk about breaches, you're used to seeing hey, AT&T just got hacked for all their user IDs, passwords, social security numbers, which I don't know if you guys are aware, but just happened a week ago, 2 weeks ago, something like that. But there is a lot of, that's what we're used to seeing. But the inside breaches, I think, sometimes can be a little bit less sensational, but just as critical. So in the US, there was a very high-profile athlete who had a child abuse charge against him. And that's all of our privacy laws, and no one should know the details of that. Well, those details got leaked. And it actually got leaked from an database. But it wasn't hacked. It was that someone had not the least access privilege. They had, I'm in, you're safe, we know who you are, we're going to trust you. They read all that stuff they shouldn't have read. They leaked it to a news reporter, went on the news, and now the agency that had that information leaked, they made the news. So, and a lot of it is financially motivated. Now, in that particular case, it's assumed that the person got paid for that information, but we don't know that for sure. But again, so those are the where and why of breaches. So you're not as safe as you think you are. And even software AG, because we're like you guys in the same boat, we've been doing the same thing for a long time. We actually are starting to address that. So in our R&D world, we have multi-factor authentication on our mainframe. How many of you guys have multi-factor authentication for your mainframe access? So you got a couple, but not many, right? But that's a more and more common thing. With software AG, we've actually locked down a lot in the last couple of years. And one of my colleagues joked that when he dies and go to heaven, he's still going to have to do a multi-factor authentication to verify it really is him that died. But so again, it really is just that somewhere you are going to have to do this. And again, that mainframe multi-factor authentication is kind of one of the examples of that. And how many of you guys, well, no, I'll ask that later, never mind. But we do tend to rely on the security that we've had in systems that started in 1989, So let's look a little bit about where you should address zero trust. And just things to keep in mind. Continuous verification, limit that blast radius of microsegmentation, automate context collection and response. Everyone has natural security logs turned on? Yes? Okay, good. Adabas, do you keep your P logs for ever? Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. But typically when we think about it, we think of end users, right? We want to see that the end users are the ones that's going to get into the door. But that's not all we have these days. Obviously, we have the developers, right? And typically, developers have access to a lot more information. I know you had said that you can't edit programs in production or anything like that, but do they have the same access as a user, as like a super user of the application to be able to diagnose the system?
Depending on their role, yeah, they can.
Okay, and and again, that kind of addresses that of, is there a distinction of when they go in as a normal user, or is I'm debugging this?
Well, if it's still on the mainframe too, you've got like a firewall option, which gives you God mode.
There you go, yeah.
Which is a vulnerability. Like,
Right, yeah. So, and again, it's that trust, zero trust. So that least privilege access of what you want. But now we have APIs everywhere. We have that access from other systems, from different things. And this is one of my pet peeves, I guess you could say. We've always FTP data everywhere. Do you guys know where that data ends up all the time and who gets control of it? And do they follow those same rules that you guys follow? A lot of times not. So I do know of two major hacks of Adabas data. One was at a higher education institute. One was actually at a government agency. Adabas data was safe and sound in Adabas, hiding behind all the walls. They FTP'd that data. One was to a backup server in an ADA unload to a unprotected SQL Server database. The other one was FTP'd to a data warehouse. The data warehouse got hacked. The unprotected SQL Server box that had a flat file with social security numbers, with credit card information, also got hacked. So that's where it went. So be aware of where your data goes. And I think one of the biggest sins of all of us, well, I shouldn't say all, a lot of customers we've seen, they put production data in test databases. Do not do that. So, and again, data and code, and again, this is where I'm going to steal the second piece of his presentation, is version your code. Lock it down so people can't go into Natural in production and write give Bob $5 million, run, delete. So I love the versioning of the code. Have the history of, and if you remember, one of the other things was that audit everything, keep every log. That's part of it. It's not just data changes, it's data access, it's code changes, it's even code access. So I will ask the question now. Who here has application level security written in Natural? Really? Right? So it's okay. Who of those uses star user for that security? To say if it's star user. Okay. Who out of those people can say that they could either autos turned off, autos turned on, or they can do nap parms? Do they have to see a Natural logon screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. Because we did this little test, and I'm not going to name the name of the company, but I heard they had an international user group somewhere. Now, granted, this isn't their demo environment, so there isn't any safe data. But so this user, USA RJE, logged on to the complete environment using RACF. While we had auto turned on, it was able to say auto off. Then he logged on to a library using a different username. And because auto was normally turned on, no one had ever changed the Natural passwords because you screw up the RACF every single time you do that. So then they wrote a little program that said display user and display init user. So, and that user wrote a very nasty note to the president and put the other person's name. No. So again, that's just kind of one of those things. We've always done it this way. So go try that in your guys' environment. See if you can do it. I'm just going to touch a little bit on the database security. So you say, hey, look, I have total access control of my database. That's like having a gate without a fence. And if you have encryption without access control, it's like having a fence without a gate or having an open gate. It's only when you put the two together, encryption and access control, have you really secured your database. So, and we'll talk a little bit about the encryption part and the access control part here in a sec. Let's get to the how part of how you can control, how you can protect your stuff, how you can address zero trust. Again, zero trust, more of concepts, a framework. It isn't an end state. No, there is no final, oh, I've done everything for zero trust, because there's always threats. So, database encryption. And you guys have it here? Okay, we'll talk a little bit about that. The idea is not to explain every product in detail, but the Adabas SAF gateway, so that while you're not having a single point of access, it's still reducing the number of access points. So using Adabas SAF security, I can control who can see my data sets, who can see my information in Adabas through RACF. Adabas auditing, and I think Eric's going to talk a little bit more about that with one of our customers. Adabas auditing is that tracking part. What did we do? Who did it? When did they do it? Whether it's just read. So everything about Adabas. One of our customers might have even been that same customer that had that breach of data from that high-profile guy. They implemented that so they could say, let us know the minute someone looks at something inappropriate, which was kind of cool. You know, I mean, it was good. It went through all the things. But I thought the thing that was really fascinating is they started to say, well, let's look at some of these other statistics. Why does this one case get looked at 100 times more than all the other cases? Or why does this one user look at cases across multiple counties when they shouldn't necessarily be doing that? So that auditing gives you that picture of, hey, something might be going on. It's not just the post-mortem, oh, how did we get hacked? How did we get information out? But it's starting to look and give you warning signs of, this is something we should really close up. So for that example, they actually limited the access to the counties you were only supposed to look at. They had to make changes to the natural application. But anytime you change that, you actually had to put a security thing in and a reason of why you were going against that. For the Linux folks, and Luciano's going to talk a little bit more about this, we have role-based access control. Again, that was one of the primary rules of it, of who can least access. Even old stuff like ADA SCR, so the encryption. Again, that Adabase utilities, that's more the caveat. If I do an ADA unload and decompress, and my data is not encrypted anymore. My data is not necessarily protected by all the stuff that I protected in Adabase. Be aware of where those things go, because they can be hacked. For those of you guys that use SQL Gateway, always use TLS. Always use the SSL connection for the old term. Always use the integrated security. So it has more security than you can shake a fist, stick at. Use that. Use their even down to the field level security. They have great logging with it. And those of you guys that use entire network, works, again with SSL, SAF gateway to ensure that data that is in flight is protected. And then on the natural side, oh, I kind of blew that, sorry. Again, everyone here uses SSL for connections to the natural world. You guys, great. Natural SAF gateway. Again, if someone's authority gets changed or revoked in RACF and top secret, whatever your is on the mainframe, it automatically gets revoked in natural. Natural security, logging on. Okay, my other pet peeve is how many people either do not secure their batch jobs, they run natural unsecured because it's batch. Well, I can actually execute batch online. Or You can go look in the JCL and see the password. Again, it's something that's been sat for 30 years, 40 years, our stuff is out there. It's like, well, but it's just a report job. Yeah, but that password will still get you into other things. So again, look at things like that. As you said, go back and review the way things are done, because there's probably some bad practices out there. Natural long passwords can be done now. 8 letters are easy to crack. More is more better. Predict application control or DevOps. We always use that, but make sure you lock down your source code somehow. And as we talked about with the APIs, long passwords, encrypted passwords in the RPC server, you can actually now do longer than 8 characters, so you don't, and also run with impersonation. That way you ensure you're passing the right password for the right user. You're not passing the server startup password. And then RBAC, again, Luciano will talk a little bit about more of that. That's in the Linux world, that role-based access control. And for the systems guys in the room, make sure you're using Authorized Service Manager to work with zip, work with the global buffer pool, the NDB server. Natural One, secured connection. We kind of get lazy sometimes and don't use that into NDB. When you are using DevOps, again, you're handing that natural code off to another world. Make sure you get that done. Make sure that they have the same level of control that you do. And you guys sound like you have a great version of that. Also, the NDB server has the long passwords you can get into. And as Guido said, we're introducing multi-factor authentication. One of our customers in Florida is already doing it. And in the interest of time, there were some little suggestions. I'm going to skip through all those, especially since Luciano is going to be talking about those. Really quickly, to end up, I did just want to talk a little bit more about database auditing. Again, the insights that you get in the usage of your application, of your databases, who's accessing it, where they're accessing it from, I think is really, really invaluable. And our last little slide is just resources. So some external, some internal. And with that, any questions, comments?